5 years. For 5 long years, the boy hadn't uttered a single word. No crying, no laughter, just those big blue eyes staring into emptiness, clutching his mother's old teddy bear as if it were the only real thing left in his world. His father was no ordinary businessman. Marcus Blackwell was the most powerful mafia boss in Chicago, a man who made the entire underworld tremble in fear. He could buy anything, eliminate anyone. Yet he was utterly powerless against his own son's silence. Millions of dollars had been poured into the hands of top specialists. They all confirmed the same thing. Ethan was born deaf. There was no hope. But there was something strange that no one noticed. Every time a loud noise echoed through the house, the boy's shoulders would flinch ever so slightly. Every time someone walked heavily past his room, his head would tilt just a fraction to one side. And the only person who noticed wasn't the family's private physician. It wasn't the powerful mafia boss. It was a maid who had just arrived. A 27-year-old woman running from an abusive ex-husband, carrying in her heart the unbearable pain of losing a daughter who never got to take her first breath. She came here only to hide. She had no intention of saving anyone. But what she was about to discover would expose a crime that had been perfectly concealed for 5 years, a perpetrator that Marcus himself trusted the most, and would shatter everything this family had believed to be true. The boy wasn't born into silence. Someone had stolen his voice, and the root of that silence was a secret that no one, absolutely no one, could have ever imagined. The Blackwell mansion stood on the outskirts of Chicago like a monument to power and grief. Spanning over 15,000 square feet, the estate rose behind towering iron gates that reached 12 feet into the gray sky. Security cameras dotted every corner of the property, their red lights blinking like watchful eyes that never slept. Armed guards patrolled the perimeter in shifts, their presence a constant reminder that this was no ordinary home. This was the fortress of Marcus Blackwell, and fortresses were built to keep enemies out. But no amount of security could keep out the emptiness that had settled into the mansion's bones. Inside, marble floors stretched across vast hallways, where footsteps echoed like whispers in a cathedral. Crystal chandeliers hung from vaulted ceilings, casting cold light over furniture that cost more than most people earned in a lifetime. Priceless paintings lined the walls, and antique vases sat on pedestals, untouched and unloved. Everything was immaculate, everything was expensive, and everything felt utterly lifeless. It had not always been this way. 5 years ago, these halls had known laughter. Elena Blackwell had filled every room with warmth, her voice carrying through the corridors like music. She had insisted on fresh flowers in every room, had played classical music during breakfast, had danced with Marcus in the kitchen when no one was watching. She had been the heart of this home, the only person who could make the feared mafia boss smile without restraint. And then she was gone. The memory still haunted Marcus like a wound that refused to heal. He remembered the phone call, Victor's voice tight with controlled panic. He remembered racing to the hospital, bursting through doors, demanding answers, but there were no answers that could bring her back. Elena had been caught in the crossfire of a rival gang's ambush. A bullet meant for Marcus had found her instead. She had been driving home from the grocery store, planning to make Ethan's favorite dinner. She never made it past the intersection on Madison Street. Marcus had avenged her death within 72 hours. The rival gang no longer existed. Their leader had begged for mercy before the end, but Marcus had none left to give. He had buried every single one of them, and then he had buried his wife in the cemetery on the hill overlooking the city she had loved. But vengeance had not filled the void. It had only deepened it. Now the rose garden Elena had tended with such care stood withered and neglected behind the mansion. No one dared touch it. The gardeners had tried once, in those early months, to prune the dying bushes back to life. Marcus had fired them on the spot. Those roses had been Elena's joy, and if they could not live without her, then they would die with her memory intact. Inside the mansion, only 2 people remained from the days when Elena had walked these halls. Rosa Martinez, the 62-year-old cook who had served the family for over a decade, still prepared meals in the massive kitchen. She moved quietly now, speaking only when spoken to, her eyes carrying the weight of watching a family crumble. She had loved Elena like a daughter, and she loved Ethan the same way. The other was Victor Kane, Marcus's right hand and the only man alive he trusted completely. Victor was 40 years old, with sharp eyes that missed nothing and a loyalty that had been tested and proven countless times. He had been with Marcus since the beginning, had helped build the empire that now stretched across Chicago's underworld. He handled the things Marcus could not be seen handling, and he never asked questions that did not need answers. Together, they kept the mansion running. But running was not the same as living. Marcus himself had become 2 different men. By day, He was the boss, cold and calculating, making decisions that determined the fate of hundreds. His enemies feared him. His allies respected him. No one dared cross Marcus Blackwell. But at night, when the business was done and the phone calls ended, Marcus became someone else entirely. He would climb the stairs to Ethan's room, his footsteps heavy with exhaustion that had nothing to do with work. He would sit beside his son's bed, watching the boy sleep with that old teddy bear clutched to his chest. And he would talk. He told Ethan about his day, about the weather, about the stars visible through the window. He told him stories Elena used to tell, trying to remember her exact words, her exact inflections. He told him how much he was loved, how much he was wanted, how sorry he was that he could not fix what was broken. Ethan never responded. The doctor said he could not hear a single word. But Marcus kept talking anyway, because the alternative was silence, and silence was something he could no longer bear. But in this house filled with guards and cameras, with locks and alarms and every security measure money could buy, no one was protecting Ethan from the most dangerous threat of all. The enemy was not outside the gates. The enemy came through the front door every week, welcomed with handshakes and trust, carrying a medical bag filled with poison disguised as medicine. And Marcus had no idea. Every morning, Marcus Blackwell woke at 5 o'clock sharp, not because he needed to, but because those early hours belonged to Ethan, and nothing in his empire was more important than that. The mansion was still dark when he climbed the stairs to the second floor. His footsteps were soft, deliberate, though he knew the sound would make no difference to the boy waiting in the room at the end of the hall. Still, old habits died hard, and some part of Marcus still hoped that one day his son might hear him coming. Ethan was always awake before him. The boy sat in the same spot every morning, curled into the window seat that overlooked Elena's withered rose garden. His mother's teddy bear was pressed against his chest, its fur worn thin from years of constant holding. His blue eyes stared out at the garden below, watching nothing, seeing nothing, lost in a world Marcus could not reach. Marcus knelt beside his son, lowering himself to eye level. He had learned sign language in the months after Elena's death, spending countless hours with instructors, practicing until his fingers moved as naturally as speech. He signed good morning, his movements slow and precise. He signed I love you. He signed your father is here. Ethan did not look at him. His gaze remained fixed on the window, on the thorny remains of roses that would never bloom again. The room around them was filled with equipment designed to bridge the gap between silence and sound. Flashing lights had been installed to alert Ethan to visitors or emergencies. A vibrating alarm sat on his nightstand, meant to wake him each morning. Screens mounted on the walls could display captions of spoken words in real time, translating the world into text he might understand. None of it worked. The specialist had tried everything: visual aids, tactile communication, behavioral therapy. Each new approach came with promises of progress, and each one ended in the same quiet defeat. Ethan remained unreachable, a living statue trapped behind glass that no one could shatter. Breakfast was a ritual of shared silence. Rosa prepared the same meal each morning: scrambled eggs, toast with butter, fresh orange juice. She arranged it carefully on plates and carried them to the small dining table near the kitchen, where Marcus and Ethan ate together. The massive, formal dining room with its 20-seat table remained unused, too vast and cold for a family of two. Marcus placed Ethan's plate in front of him, then sat across the table and watched. The boy ate slowly, mechanically, his eyes never lifting from the food. He chewed without expression, swallowed without acknowledgement, existing in motions that seemed more programmed than lived. Marcus ate too, though he rarely tasted anything. His attention remained on his son, searching for any flicker of connection, any sign that Ethan knew he was not alone. The search always ended the same way. In disappointment, he had learned to swallow like medicine. Afternoons brought their walks through the garden. Marcus would take Ethan's hand, small and limp in his own, and lead him along the stone pathways that wound through the estate. He pointed at trees and named them: oak, maple, elm. He gestured toward birds and identified their songs, though he knew Ethan could not hear them. Cardinal, sparrow, blue jay. Ethan followed a few steps behind, his teddy bear tucked under one arm, his feet shuffling through fallen leaves. He never looked where Marcus pointed. He never squeezed his father's hand in return. He simply walked, present in body but absent in... He sat beside Ethan's bed with books Elena had chosen years ago, their pages worn from repeated readings. He read about brave knights and magical kingdoms, about talking animals and faraway lands. His voice filled the quiet room, rising and falling with the drama of each tale, performing for an audience who could not hear a single word. But Marcus read anyway. because Elena had read to Ethan every night before she died, and Marcus would not let that tradition disappear along with everything else. Every Thursday, Dr. Harrison Cole arrived for his weekly examination. The doctor was a distinguished man in his mid-50s, with silver hair and wire-rimmed glasses that gave him an air of trustworthy intelligence. He carried a leather medical bag and spoke in measured tones, his manner calm and reassuring. He had been Elena's doctor first, treating her through minor illnesses and routine checkups. After her death, he had offered to care for Ethan, and Marcus had accepted without hesitation. Cole was the last connection to the life they had lost, a familiar face in a world turned unfamiliar. Each visit followed the same pattern. Cole examined Ethan, checked his vitals, reviewed his medications, and each visit ended with the same words, delivered with practiced sympathy. "No progress, I'm afraid, but he's stable. Continue the current medication." Marcus nodded every time, grateful for the doctor's dedication, trusting his expertise without question. Cole had been with the family for years. He had wept at Elena's funeral. He visited Ethan when no other doctor would bother with a case deemed hopeless. Why would Marcus ever doubt him? But trust, once given to the wrong person, becomes the sharpest blade. And Marcus did not know that every pill his son swallowed was not healing him but burying him deeper in silence. He did not know that the man he welcomed into his home each week was not saving Ethan but destroying him, one dose at a time. Someone was about to discover that truth. And when she did, everything would change. Evelyn Carter stood at the Chicago bus station with a single suitcase and $23 to her name. The January wind cut through her thin jacket, but she barely felt it. After everything she had survived, cold was nothing. She was 27 years old, and she had been running her entire life. The memories came whether she wanted them or not. She was 4 when a police officer explained that Mommy and Daddy were not coming home. A drunk driver on Highway 41, dead on impact. Suddenly, she was being loaded into a car with a social worker who smelled like cigarettes and pity. 7 foster families in 14 years. 7 front doors that opened with promises and closed with disappointment. The 3rd family was where the foster father came to her room at night. She was 8 years old, too young to understand, old enough to know it was wrong. She told her foster mother, who slapped her and called her a liar. For 2 years, she slept with her dresser pushed against the door. The 5th family kept her locked in a closet whenever guests visited. They fed her scraps and dressed her in clothes 3 sizes too small. The darkness of that closet still haunted her nightmares. At 12, a foster father broke 3 of her ribs for spilling milk. She spent 2 weeks in the hospital, telling nurses she had fallen down the stairs. No one questioned a clumsy foster kid. At 18, the system released her with a handshake and a list of homeless shelters. She worked as a waitress, a cleaner, anything that paid. At 21, she met Ryan Carter. He was handsome with dark eyes and a smile that made her forget every warning. He bought her flowers, called her beautiful, told her she deserved love. They married 6 months later. The first hit came 3 weeks after the wedding. Dinner was cold, and suddenly his hand sent her crashing into the wall. He cried afterward, promised it would never happen again. 4 years of bruises hidden under long sleeves, 3 broken bones, 5 hospital visits. The same lie every time. I fell down the stairs. Ryan isolated her from everyone. He controlled the money, the car keys, her every movement. He told her she was nothing without him. At 25, she discovered she was pregnant. A daughter. She named her Lily. For the first time in years, hope flickered in her chest. She was 7 months pregnant when Ryan came home drunk. His dinner was cold. The beating lasted 3 minutes. When she woke in the hospital, a doctor spoke words that shattered her world. Placental abruption, fetal demise. Lily was dead, killed by the fists of the man who should have protected them. Ryan was arrested but made bail within 48 hours. He found Evelyn in a parking lot, wrapped his hands around her throat, and promised what he would do if she testified. She did not testify. Ryan walked free. Evelyn ran. She cut her hair, changed her name, disappeared. She became a ghost searching for somewhere safe. The job posting appeared on a bulletin board. Live-in housekeeper needed. Private residence. Discretion required. The Blackwell mansion was a fortress behind gates and guards, invisible to the outside world. The perfect place for a woman to vanish completely. Evelyn did not want a family. She only wanted to disappear, to survive another day. She had no idea that the silent boy waiting inside those walls would change everything. The iron gates of the Blackwell mansion rose before Evelyn like the entrance to another world. 12 feet of black metal twisted into elegant patterns, topped with security cameras that tracked her every movement. Beyond the gates, A long driveway curved through manicured lawns toward a house that looked more like a castle than a home. Evelyn clutched her suitcase and pressed the intercom button. Her fingers were trembling, though not from the cold. A voice crackled through the speaker. "Name and purpose. Evelyn Carter. I'm here about the housekeeper position." The gates swung open without another word. A man was waiting for her at the end of the driveway. He stood with military posture, his arms crossed over a broad chest, his eyes scanning her from head to toe with the precision of someone trained to spot threats. This was not a butler. This was a soldier. "Victor Kane," he said, offering no handshake. "Follow me." Evelyn followed in silence. She knew better than to ask questions or make small talk. Men like this did not appreciate chatter. The inside of the mansion stole her breath. Marble floors stretched in every direction, gleaming under crystal chandeliers that hung from ceilings so high they seemed to disappear. Oil paintings lined the walls, portraits of stern-faced ancestors and landscapes of places she would never see. Everything was polished, pristine, and utterly cold. There was no warmth here, no photographs of smiling faces, no flowers in vases, just wealth displayed like armor, protecting whatever lay beneath. Victor led her to a study at the end of a long hallway. He knocked once, opened the door, and stepped aside. Marcus Blackwell sat behind a mahogany desk that could have anchored a ship. He was larger than Evelyn had expected, tall and broad-shouldered, with hands that looked capable of breaking bones. A faint scar traced the line of his chin, pale against tanned skin. His dark hair was streaked with gray at the temples, and his jaw was set in an expression that seemed permanently carved from stone. But his eyes were not cold. They were exhausted, hollow, the eyes of a man who had stopped sleeping years ago and never started again. "Sit," Marcus said. It was not a request. Evelyn sat. The interview was unlike any she had experienced. Marcus asked few questions. He did not inquire about her work history or request references. He simply watched her, studying her face with an intensity that made her want to look away. She did not look away. "You don't smile much," he observed. "Neither do you," she replied. Something flickered in his expression, not anger, perhaps surprise that someone had spoken to him so directly. "My son is deaf," Marcus said finally. "Born that way. He doesn't speak. He doesn't respond to sound or touch. He exists in his own world, and no one has been able to reach him." He paused. "Your job is to keep his room clean and ensure he is comfortable. Nothing more. Do not try to fix him. Do not try to connect with him. Just do your work and stay out of the way." Evelyn nodded. She understood being invisible. She had practiced it her entire life. "Rosa will show you to your room," Marcus said, already looking down at papers on his desk. "You start tomorrow." The dismissal was clear. Evelyn rose and followed the older woman who had appeared in the doorway. Rosa Martinez had kind eyes and weathered hands, the sort of woman who had spent decades caring for others. They walked through more hallways, past more closed doors, until Rosa stopped before a room on the second floor. The door was slightly open. "That's the boy's room," Rosa whispered. "Ethan." Evelyn glanced through the gap. A small figure sat on the floor by the window, bathed in pale afternoon light. He clutched an old teddy bear against his chest, holding it as if it were the only thing keeping him anchored to earth. His blue eyes stared at nothing, empty and distant. He did not move. He did not blink. He simply existed, suspended in a silence so deep it seemed to swallow everything around him. Something cracked inside Evelyn's chest, a feeling she could not name, sharp and sudden, piercing through the numbness she had wrapped around herself for years. She knew that emptiness. She recognized that loneliness. She had seen it every day in the mirror, in the eyes of a little girl locked in a closet, forgotten by the world. Evelyn did not know it yet, but in that single moment, her fate became intertwined with the boy in the window. She had come here to disappear. Instead, she would find something she had lost long ago, and nothing would ever be the same. The first week passed in a rhythm of quiet routine. Evelyn woke before dawn, dressed in simple clothes, and began her work while the mansion still slept. She dusted shelves that had been dusted the day before. She mopped floors that barely needed mopping. She polished silver that already gleamed. The work was mindless, repetitive, and exactly what she needed. In this house, silence was not a warning. It was not the suffocating stillness that came before Ryan's fists. It was simply peace, vast and empty and safe. Evelyn moved through the hallways like a ghost, speaking to no one, drawing no attention. For the first time in years, she could breathe. Rosa was the only person who broke her solitude. The older woman appeared each afternoon in the kitchen. preparing meals with practiced hands while sharing stories Evelyn had not asked to hear. "This house used to be different," Rosa said one day, stirring a pot of soup. "When Mrs. Elena was alive, there was music everywhere. She played piano in the morning. She sang to Ethan every night. The boy would sit on her lap and touch her face while she sang, like he was trying to feel the sound." Evelyn listened without responding. She had learned that Rosa needed no encouragement to continue. "He changed after she died," Rosa continued, her voice dropping. "Before, he was quiet. Yes, he could not hear, but he was present. He looked at people. He reached for things. He smiled." She shook her head slowly. "Now he is like a candle that someone blew out. The shape is there, but the light is gone." Evelyn thought about those words long after Rosa returned to her cooking. She began watching Ethan more carefully, not approaching him, not trying to interact, just observing from doorways and hallways, studying the boy who sat motionless by his window hour after hour. She noticed patterns. He always chose the same corner. He always held the teddy bear with his right arm. His eyes tracked the sunlight as it moved across the wall, following shadows with an attention that seemed almost deliberate. He was not as empty as everyone believed. Something was happening behind those blue eyes. Evelyn was certain of it. Then came the moment that changed everything. She was cleaning the hallway outside Ethan's room, pushing a mop bucket across the hardwood floor. Her grip slipped. The metal bucket crashed against the baseboard with a sound that echoed through the corridor like a gunshot. Evelyn froze, embarrassed by her clumsiness. And then she saw it. Ethan's shoulders flinched. His head turned slightly, just a fraction of an inch, toward the direction of the noise. His fingers tightened around the teddy bear. For 3 seconds, maybe 4, the boy reacted to a sound he should not have been able to hear. Then he returned to stillness, as if nothing had happened. Evelyn's heart pounded against her ribs. She stood motionless, replaying the moment in her mind. Had she imagined it? Had she seen what she wanted to see? No, she was certain. The reaction had been real. She said nothing to anyone, not to Rosa, not to Victor, certainly not to Marcus. She had no proof, only a feeling, and feelings meant nothing to people like them. But she began testing. When she walked past Ethan's room, she varied her footsteps, sometimes soft and light, sometimes heavy and deliberate. She watched for reactions, cataloging every tiny movement. Most of the time, nothing happened. Ethan remained frozen in his window seat, lost in whatever world he had retreated to. But sometimes, when she stepped harder or dropped something nearby, his body would respond. A twitch of the shoulder, a slight turn of the head, a barely perceptible tensing of his small frame. It was inconsistent. It was subtle. It could easily be dismissed as coincidence. But Evelyn knew better. She had spent years reading Ryan's moods, watching for the smallest signs that danger was coming. She had trained herself to notice what others missed, because noticing meant surviving. Ethan was reacting to sound. She was sure of it. She was not a doctor. She had no medical training, no fancy degrees, no right to question the specialists who had examined him for years. But she had something none of them possessed. She had the eyes of someone the world had ignored. She knew how to see the invisible, because she had been invisible herself. And she was not going to look away now. Evelyn made a decision. She would test Ethan systematically, carefully, without drawing attention. If she was wrong, nothing would change. If she was right, she did not know what she would do, but she needed to know the truth. Day 1. She walked past Ethan's room during her afternoon cleaning routine. Instead of her usual quiet steps, she let her heels strike the hardwood floor with deliberate force. The sound echoed down the hallway like distant thunder. Ethan was in his usual spot by the window. As Evelyn's footsteps reached him, his head tilted slightly to the right, just a fraction, just for a moment. Then he was still again. Evelyn kept walking, her pulse quickening. Day 2. She positioned herself outside his doorway with a dust cloth in her hand. Pretending to clean the wooden frame, she knocked her knuckles against it twice. Soft taps, barely louder than a heartbeat. Ethan's fingers tightened around his teddy bear. His grip shifted, then relaxed. He had heard something. She was certain. Day 3. She dragged a wooden chair across the tile floor in the hallway, creating a low scraping sound that vibrated through the walls. It was not loud, but it was deep, resonant. Ethan blinked, faster than usual. His eyelids fluttered 3 times in quick succession before returning to their half-closed stillness. Evelyn catalogued every detail in her mind. She had no notebook, no pen, no way to record her observations without raising suspicion. But her memory was sharp. Years with Ryan had trained her to remember everything. She had learned to read his moods like weather patterns, the way his jaw tightened before a storm, the way his voice dropped before violence. She had memorized the angle of his shoulders, the rhythm of his breathing, the exact moment when silence became dangerous. That vigilance had kept her alive. Now she used it for something else entirely. Patterns began to emerge. Low sounds produced stronger reactions than high ones. Deep vibrations, bass tones, heavy footsteps. All of these made Ethan move, however slightly. High-pitched noises, sharp voices, metallic clinks seemed to pass through him without effect. His right ear was more sensitive than his left. When sounds came from the right side, his responses were quicker, more pronounced. From the left, he barely reacted at all. Evelyn stored each observation like treasure, building a picture that contradicted everything the doctors had said. At night, she lay in her small room at the back of the mansion, staring at the ceiling. The bed was narrow and the walls were bare, but it was hers. No one could enter without her permission. No one could hurt her here. Her thoughts drifted to Lily. She would have been 2 years old now, walking, talking, laughing. Evelyn imagined tiny hands reaching for her face, a small voice calling her mama. She imagined bedtime stories and birthday candles and all the moments that would never exist. The grief was a weight she carried always, heavy and permanent. But tonight, something else stirred beneath it. If Lily had lived, Evelyn would have protected her with everything she had. She would have fought anyone who tried to harm her daughter. She would have burned the world down to keep her safe. Lily was gone. Nothing could change that. But Ethan was here, alone in his silence, surrounded by people who had stopped looking for the truth. He was not her child. He was not her responsibility. And yet, she saw herself in him. The loneliness, the invisibility, the way the world had decided what he was without bothering to look closer. Someone needed to see him, really see him. Maybe that someone was her. Evelyn knew she needed more than observations. She needed a controlled test, something that would prove beyond doubt that Ethan could hear. She needed a device that could produce sound, something she could direct precisely, adjust carefully. That night, after the household had gone to sleep, she crept downstairs to the living room. The mansion was vast and full of forgotten things, drawers stuffed with items no one remembered, closets holding relics of happier times. She opened a cabinet near the fireplace, searching through old remotes and tangled cables. Her fingers brushed against something smooth and curved, a wireless earbud. Small, dusty, but intact. She pulled it out and examined it in the dim light. It was old but functional, probably belonging to Elena years ago, the kind that connected to a phone and played music directly into the ear. Evelyn's heart beat faster. This was what she needed, a way to deliver sound directly to Ethan, to test his hearing without anyone else knowing, a way to find the truth that everyone else had missed. She slipped the earbud into her pocket and returned to her room. Tomorrow, everything would change. The next morning, Evelyn cleaned the earbud with a damp cloth, polishing away years of dust until it gleamed. She connected it to her phone, testing the Bluetooth signal, making sure the device still worked. A soft chime confirmed the connection. Now she needed to wait. The hours crawled by. She scrubbed floors she had already scrubbed. She dusted shelves that needed no dusting. Every few minutes, she glanced at the clock on the kitchen wall, counting down until Marcus left for his afternoon meetings. At 2 o'clock, the black sedan pulled out of the driveway. Victor was driving. The guards at the gate saluted as the car passed through. The mansion fell into deeper silence. Rosa was napping in her room, a daily habit she never missed. The hallways were empty. The only sound was the distant ticking of a grandfather clock somewhere on the first floor. Evelyn climbed the stairs to the second floor. Her palms were sweating. Her heart drummed against her chest with every step. Ethan's door was slightly open, as always. She pushed it gently and stepped inside. The boy sat in his usual place by the window, his teddy bear pressed against his chest, his blue eyes fixed on the dying rose garden below. Afternoon sunlight filtered through the glass, casting golden patterns across the carpet. He did not look up when she entered. He never did. Evelyn lowered herself to the floor, sitting cross-legged about 4 feet away from him. She did not speak. She did not move toward him. She simply sat, letting him grow accustomed to her presence. Minutes passed. Ethan remained motionless, a statue carved from flesh and silence. Evelyn pulled out her phone and the earbud. Her fingers trembled slightly as she opened the music app, scrolling through options until she found what she wanted, a piano piece, something soft and gentle, the kind of melody that felt like a lullaby. She pressed play. The music began flowing through the tiny speaker, barely audible even to her own ears. Slowly, carefully, she raised the earbud and brought it closer to Ethan's right side, 1 inch from his ear, then half an inch. She held her breath. For several seconds, nothing happened. Ethan stared at the window, unchanged, unreachable. Evelyn's hope began to sink like a stone in deep water. Maybe she had been wrong. Maybe the reactions she had observed were nothing but coincidence. Then his eyes widened. It was subtle, almost imperceptible, but Evelyn caught it. The boy's eyelids lifted just slightly, revealing more of those blue irises. His brow furrowed, creating tiny creases on his forehead that had not been there a moment before. His head began to tilt. Slowly, almost mechanically, Ethan turned toward the source of the sound. His movement was hesitant, uncertain, like someone waking from a long sleep. His lips parted, trembling, as if trying to form words that would not come. And then he looked at the earbud. Not through it, not past it, at it. For the first time since Evelyn had arrived at the mansion, Ethan Blackwell focused his attention on something in the physical world. His eyes locked onto the small device in her hand, studying it with an intensity that took her breath away. He was aware. He was present. He was hearing. Evelyn remained frozen, afraid that any movement would shatter the moment. The piano music continued to play, soft notes rippling through the air like water over stones. Then, as quickly as it had come, the moment passed. Ethan turned back to the window. His face went blank again. His body returned to its familiar stillness, as if someone had flipped a switch and turned off the light inside him. Evelyn pulled the earbud away and stopped the music. Her hands were shaking. Her heart pounded so hard she could hear it in her ears. That was not a reflex. That was not coincidence. That was recognition. That was a child responding to sound in a way that should have been impossible. Ethan was not completely deaf. The doctors had examined him for 5 years. Specialists with decades of experience had run tests and written reports and delivered verdicts. They had all agreed on the same diagnosis. Born deaf, no hope, nothing to be done. But they were wrong. Either every single one of them had made the same mistake, or someone had been lying. Someone had looked at the test results and seen the truth, then buried it beneath false reports and fabricated conclusions. Evelyn did not know which possibility was worse. She rose to her feet, her legs unsteady beneath her. Ethan did not acknowledge her departure. He simply sat, clutching his teddy bear, staring at the roses his mother would never tend again. But everything had changed. Evelyn knew the truth now, and she would not rest until she uncovered why that truth had been hidden and who had been hiding it all along. Over the following week, Evelyn returned to Ethan's room whenever the opportunity arose. Each afternoon when Marcus left and Rosa napped, she slipped upstairs with the earbud hidden in her pocket, ready to continue her quiet experiments. She tested different sounds, cataloging his responses with the precision of a scientist. Piano music made him calm. When the soft notes played near his ear, his shoulders would drop slightly, his grip on the teddy bear loosening. His breathing slowed. His face, usually frozen in blankness, softened into something almost peaceful. Water sounds sparked curiosity. The gentle rush of a stream or the patter of rain made his head tilt further than usual, his brow creasing as if he were trying to identify something familiar. Once, his hand moved toward the earbud before stopping midair, retreating back to the teddy bear. But voices affected him most deeply. When Evelyn played recordings of people speaking, soft voices, reading poetry, or telling stories, Ethan's entire demeanor shifted. His eyes would narrow with concentration. His lips would press together. He leaned toward the sound, straining to hear words that had been stolen from him for 5 long years. Each reaction confirmed what Evelyn already knew. This boy was not deaf. He was hearing something, even if imperfectly, even if filtered through damage she did not yet understand. Then came the afternoon that changed everything. Evelyn pushed open his door as usual, expecting to find him in his window seat, staring at the garden. But this time, Ethan was not looking outside. He was looking at her. His blue eyes met hers the moment she stepped into the room, not the vacant gaze she had grown accustomed to, the look that seemed to pass through people like they were made of glass. This was different. He saw her. Evelyn froze in the doorway, her breath catching in her throat. For a long moment, neither of them moved. The silence between them felt different now, charged with something new. Slowly, Evelyn smiled. Just a small curve of her lips, nothing dramatic. She did not want to frighten him. She crossed the room and sat on the floor in her usual spot. Without breaking eye contact, she pulled out the earbud and connected it to her phone. She selected a piano piece, one of his favorites based on previous reactions, and held the device near his right ear. The music began. Ethan did not look away from her face. Throughout the entire piece, nearly 4 minutes of soft melody, his eyes remained fixed on hers. He watched her with an intensity that made her heart ache. It was as if he were memorizing her features, storing her face somewhere deep inside himself where it could not be taken away. When the final note faded, something miraculous happened. Ethan's lips curved upward, just barely, just for a second, a tiny smile that flickered across his face like a candle flame in a dark room. Then it was gone, and he turned back to the window, but Evelyn had seen it. Warmth flooded her chest, a feeling she had not experienced in longer than she could remember. It was not quite happiness. It was something older, deeper, the sensation of mattering to someone, of being seen in return. She thought of Lily, her daughter's face, imagined but never seen. The weight of that loss would never leave her, but for the first time, the memory did not bring only pain. There was something else beneath it, a flicker of purpose, a reason to keep going. That evening, Rosa found Evelyn in the kitchen, washing dishes that did not need washing. "You spend a lot of time upstairs," Rosa observed, drying a plate with slow, deliberate movements. Evelyn kept her eyes on the sink. "Just doing my job." Rosa was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "The boy seems different lately. Calmer, maybe. More peaceful." She paused. "I have not seen him like this since his mother died." Evelyn said nothing. She could not explain without revealing everything, and she was not ready for that. Not yet. Rosa set down her towel and looked at Evelyn with eyes that had seen too much to be fooled. "Whatever you are doing, keep doing it." She left the kitchen without another word. Evelyn stared at the soapy water, her mind racing. She had found the truth about Ethan's hearing, but that truth raised a bigger question, one that gnawed at her constantly. Why did everyone believe he was deaf? Doctors had examined him, specialists had run tests, reports had been written and filed. An entire medical history confirmed a diagnosis that Evelyn now knew was false. Mistakes happened, but this was not a mistake. This was something else, something deliberate. The answer was hidden somewhere in this house, in files, in records, in secrets that someone had worked very hard to keep buried. Evelyn was going to find them, no matter what it took. It was nearly midnight when Evelyn found herself in the downstairs living room, dust cloth in hand. The mansion never truly slept, but at this hour, even the shadows seemed to rest. She had volunteered for late-night cleaning duties, knowing it would give her access to rooms she could not explore during the day. The living room was vast and formal, filled with furniture that looked expensive but rarely used. Heavy curtains blocked the moonlight. Oil paintings stared down from the walls with judgmental eyes. In the far corner stood an old cabinet, the kind that wealthy families used to store forgotten things. It was covered in a thin layer of dust, evidence that no one had opened it in months, perhaps years. Evelyn approached it, her footsteps silent on the thick carpet. She told herself she was just cleaning, just doing her job, but her hands moved with a different purpose as she pulled open the cabinet doors. Inside were cardboard boxes, stacked haphazardly, their edges worn and yellowed with age. She lifted the first one and peered inside. Old photographs, documents with legal letterheads, nothing useful. The second box was heavier. She set it on the floor and opened it carefully. Dozens of small medicine bottles lay inside, some empty, some still containing pills. The labels were covered in medical jargon, long chemical names she did not recognize. One bottle caught her attention. The label read, "Ethan Blackwell." Below the name was a date from 4 years ago, followed by instructions for dosage. And at the bottom, in clear print, prescribed by Dr. Harrison Cole. Evelyn's hands trembled as she picked up another bottle. Same name, same doctor, different date. She counted 12 bottles in total, spanning nearly 5 years. All prescribed by Cole, all for Ethan. Her heart began to pound. She pulled out her phone and photographed each label, making sure to capture every detail. The medication names, the dosages, the dates, the prescribing physician. Footsteps echoed in the hallway. Evelyn shoved the bottles back into the box and closed the cabinet doors in one swift motion. She grabbed her dust cloth and began wiping the nearest shelf, forcing her breathing to slow. Victor appeared in the doorway. His dark eyes scanned the room, landing on her with suspicion. He said nothing, just watched her work for a long moment before continuing down the hall. Evelyn did not move until his footsteps faded completely. Back in her room, she locked the door and sat on her bed, her phone clutched in shaking hands. She opened the browser and typed in the first medication name from her photographs. The search results loaded slowly, each second stretching into eternity. The first few links were medical databases, filled with technical language she struggled to understand. But one phrase appeared repeatedly: neurological agent. Another: experimental compound. She clicked on a research article and began to read. The medication was designed to affect nerve function in the brain. It had been tested in clinical trials years ago, but never received FDA approval. The trials had been halted due to concerns about long-term side effects. Evelyn scrolled further. One particular compound appeared in multiple search results: compound NX47. The name meant nothing to her, but the warnings attached to it made her blood run cold. Severe side effects in pediatric patients. Auditory nerve damage with prolonged use, not approved for patients under 18 years of age. She read the words 3 times, certain she must be misunderstanding, but the meaning was clear. This drug could damage hearing. It could destroy the auditory nerves in children, and it had been prescribed to Ethan for nearly 5 years. Evelyn stared at the glowing screen, her mind racing to connect the pieces. Ethan had not been born deaf. She was certain of that now. He could hear, at least partially. His reactions to sound were too consistent, too real to be imagined. But if he was not born deaf, then something had made him this way. Someone had made him this way. And that someone was Dr. Harrison Cole, the trusted family physician who visited every week, who checked Ethan's vitals and adjusted his medications, who looked Marcus in the eye and promised that there was no hope for the boy's condition. Cole had not been treating Ethan. He had been poisoning him. Evelyn's hands shook so badly she nearly dropped her phone. The implications were too enormous to process. A doctor deliberately harming a child. A father who trusted blindly while his son was destroyed from within. A boy trapped in silence, not by birth, but by betrayal. The room felt too small. The walls pressed inward. She wanted to scream, to run, to do something that would make sense of the horror she had uncovered. But she forced herself to breathe. She needed more than photographs and internet searches. She needed proof. She needed someone who could confirm what she suspected. And she needed to be very, very careful. Because if Dr. Cole discovered what she knew, she might not live long enough to tell anyone. The following nights blurred together as Evelyn dove deeper into her research. She spent every free moment hunched over her phone, searching for anything she could find about Dr. Harrison Cole. On the surface, his credentials were impeccable. Medical degree from Johns Hopkins. Residency at Massachusetts General. 15 years of experience in pediatric neurology. His professional photograph showed a distinguished man with silver hair and kind eyes, the sort of doctor parents would trust without hesitation. But Evelyn had learned long ago that surfaces could lie. She dug further, scrolling through pages of search results, clicking on links that led to archived articles and forgotten news stories. Most were glowing reviews and professional accolades. Then she found something different. A headline from 10 years ago caught her attention. Pharmatech researcher dismissed following protocol violations. The article was brief, buried in the business section of a medical journal. It described a senior researcher who had been terminated for conducting unauthorized drug trials on patients. No names were mentioned. No specific details were provided. The company had settled quietly, and the matter had disappeared from public record. But a comment at the bottom of the article mentioned a name: Dr. H. Cole. Evelyn kept searching. Another article surfaced, this one from a different publication. Allegations of unapproved drug testing on minors dismissed. Due to insufficient evidence, the story described accusations against a Pharmatech employee who had allegedly tested experimental compounds on pediatric patients without proper consent. The case had been dropped after the company's legal team intervened. Again, no name was explicitly stated, but the timeline matched perfectly. Dr. Harrison Cole had been fired from Pharmatech 10 years ago. Shortly afterward, he had reinvented himself as a private physician, offering his services to wealthy families who valued discretion over transparency. Families like the Blackwells. Evelyn remembered something Rosa had said weeks ago, a comment that had seemed unimportant at the time. She found the older woman the next afternoon, alone in the kitchen preparing dinner. "Rosa," Evelyn began carefully, "can I ask you something about Mrs. Elena?" Rosa looked up from her chopping board, her expression guarded but curious. "What about her? The family doctor, Dr. Cole. Did Mrs. Elena ever mention him?" Rosa's knife paused mid-cut. Her eyes darkened with something that looked like old suspicion. "Mrs. Elena did not like that man," Rosa said quietly. "She told Mr. Marcus once that something about him felt wrong. She could not explain it, but she trusted her instincts." Evelyn leaned closer. "When did Dr. Cole start treating the family?" Rosa thought for a moment. "After Mrs. Elena died. Maybe a few weeks later. Mr. Marcus was destroyed by grief. He could barely function. Then this doctor appeared. saying he was an old friend of the family, offering to help with the baby. An old friend? Rosa shook her head slowly. That is what he said. But Mrs. Elena never mentioned him. Not once in all the years I knew her. He came out of nowhere, like a vulture smelling death. The knife resumed its rhythmic chopping, but Rosa's hands were not as steady as before. I tried to tell Mr. Marcus, she continued. I said something felt strange about this man, but he was not listening. He was drowning in grief, and Dr. Cole threw him a rope. He grabbed it without asking where it came from. Evelyn felt anger rising in her chest, hot and sharp. Cole had targeted Marcus at his most vulnerable moment. He had used a grieving father's desperation to gain access to a child. For 5 years, he had poisoned Ethan while pretending to heal him. But why? What could he possibly gain from destroying a little boy's hearing? The answer had to be connected to his past, the unauthorized trials, the experimental compounds. Somehow, Ethan had become Cole's test subject, and no one had noticed because everyone trusted the doctor's credentials. Evelyn needed professional confirmation. She needed a real doctor to examine Ethan and verify what she suspected. Someone outside the Blackwell Circle. Someone Cole could not reach, but that meant leaving the mansion, going into the city, exposing herself to the world she had been hiding from. Ryan was still out there, still searching. Every public space was a risk. Every camera could capture her face. Every stranger could be someone he had hired to find her. She thought of the last time she had seen him, his hands around her throat, his promises of what he would do if she ever tried to escape. Fear gripped her stomach like a fist. But then she thought of Ethan, his small body in the window seat, his blue eyes staring at nothing, his tiny smile when the music played. Every day Cole visited, every pill Ethan swallowed, was another dose of poison, another piece of his hearing stolen, another chain wrapped around his silent prison. Evelyn could not save Lily. That wound would never heal, but she could save Ethan. She had to try. Tomorrow, she would leave the safety of the mansion. She would find a doctor who could help, and she would pray that Ryan did not find her first. Evelyn requested the afternoon off, telling Rosa she needed to see a doctor about headaches that would not go away. The lie came easily. She had spent years lying to protect herself. She dressed carefully that morning, a baseball cap pulled low over her forehead, sunglasses that covered half her face, a shapeless coat that hid her figure. She looked like someone who did not want to be found. Because she was. The bus ride to Cook County Hospital took 45 minutes. Evelyn sat in the back, watching every passenger who boarded, scanning for familiar faces. Her heart pounded the entire journey. Every tall man with dark hair made her flinch. Every sudden movement sent adrenaline surging through her veins. Ryan was out there somewhere, searching, waiting, but she could not let fear stop her. Not anymore. The hospital was massive, a sprawling complex of concrete and glass that hummed with constant activity. Evelyn navigated the corridors with her head down, avoiding eye contact, following signs to the pediatric wing. She had found Dr. Sarah Mitchell's name through online reviews, dedicated physician, willing to fight for her patients, not afraid to challenge difficult cases. Those words had given Evelyn hope that this woman might listen. The receptionist looked skeptical when Evelyn asked for an appointment without insurance or referral, but something in her desperate expression must have been convincing, because 10 minutes later, she was sitting in Dr. Mitchell's office. The doctor was in her mid-40s, with short gray hair and sharp eyes that missed nothing. She wore a white coat over simple clothes, and her desk was cluttered with files and family photographs. "You're not the child's mother," Dr. Mitchell said, studying Evelyn's face, "and you're not a relative. So why are you here?" Evelyn took a deep breath. "I'm a housekeeper. I work for a family in the suburbs. They have a 6-year-old boy who was diagnosed deaf at birth. But I don't think he's deaf. I think something else is wrong, doctor." Mitchell's expression remained neutral. "What makes you think that?" "He reacts to sound. Not always, but consistently enough that I started testing him. Low frequencies, music, voices. He responds to all of them. Children with hearing impairments can sometimes respond to vibrations rather than sound. This is different." Evelyn pulled out her phone. "And there's more." She showed Dr. Mitchell the photographs of the medicine bottles. The doctor took the phone and scrolled through the images slowly, her frown deepening with each swipe. When she reached the label for compound NX47, she stopped. "Where did you find these?" "In a cabinet at the house. They've been giving him these medications for years, prescribed by a doctor named Harrison Cole." Dr. Mitchell's face changed. The professional neutrality cracked, revealing something harder underneath: recognition and anger. "I know that name," she said quietly. Harrison Cole was investigated 10 years ago for conducting unauthorized drug trials on pediatric patients. The case was buried because Pharmatech's lawyers made it disappear. But everyone in the medical community knows what he did. Evelyn's heart raced. So the medication, compound NX-47, was never approved by the FDA. It was an experimental neurological agent with documented side effects including auditory nerve damage, especially in children under 5. Dr. Mitchell set the phone down. If this child has been taking this compound for years, his hearing loss may not be congenital, it may be induced. The words hit Evelyn like a physical blow. Hearing what she had suspected confirmed by a medical professional made it terrifyingly real. Can the damage be reversed? She asked. Possibly. It depends on how long the exposure lasted and how much damage was done. But first, we need to examine the child properly. Independent testing, full audiological workup. Doctor, Mitchell leaned forward. And you need to tell his father. Evelyn's stomach tightened. His father is not an easy man to approach. He trusts Dr. Cole completely. He won't believe me. Then you need to make him believe. Bring me evidence. Bring me the child. I'll document everything and testify if necessary. Dr. Mitchell's eyes were fierce. Men like Cole don't stop. If he's using this boy as a test subject, there may be others. We need to stop him. Evelyn nodded, her mind racing. She had what she came for. A medical ally, professional confirmation, a path forward. But the hardest part still lay ahead. Marcus Blackwell was a man who trusted no one. He had built walls around himself and his son, walls that kept the world at bay. Evelyn was just a housekeeper, a stranger who had worked in his home for mere weeks. Why would he believe her over a doctor he had trusted for years? She did not have an answer, but she knew she had to find one, because every day that passed was another day Ethan suffered. Another pill, another dose of poison, another piece of his future stolen. The evidence was in her hands. The ally was ready to fight. Now all she needed was Marcus's trust, and she would have to earn it in a way she never expected. Evelyn returned to the mansion with her mind racing. Dr. Mitchell's words echoed in her head, demanding action, but approaching Marcus directly felt impossible. She needed something more, something undeniable. She decided to try one last time with Ethan. If she could capture his reaction on video, if she could record proof that he responded to sound, Marcus would have to listen. The afternoon was quiet. Marcus had left for a meeting downtown. Victor was coordinating security somewhere on the grounds. Rosa was preparing dinner in the kitchen, humming softly to herself. Evelyn climbed the stairs with the earbud in her pocket and her phone ready to record. Ethan's door was open, as always. The boy sat in his window seat, bathed in golden afternoon light, his teddy bear clutched against his chest. He looked like a painting, beautiful and still and heartbreakingly alone. Evelyn stepped inside and closed the door gently behind her. She crossed the room and sat on the floor directly in front of him, closer than she had ever been before. Her knees almost touched his. She could see the individual lashes framing his blue eyes, the slight flush of color on his pale cheeks. For a moment, she simply looked at him, and he looked back. Not through her, not past her. At her, his eyes found hers and held them with an intensity that made her breath catch. "Ethan," she said softly, her voice barely above a whisper, "I'm going to play some music for you. Would you like to hear it?" He did not respond with words, but his eyes did not leave her face. Evelyn pulled out the earbud and connected it to her phone. She had asked Rosa earlier about Elena's favorite songs, the lullabies she used to sing to Ethan when he was a baby. Rosa had mentioned one piece in particular, a piano melody that Elena had hummed every night. Evelyn found the recording and pressed play. The first notes drifted through the tiny speaker, soft and delicate as falling snow. She brought the earbud close to Ethan's right ear, holding it steady, watching his face. For a few seconds, nothing happened. Then his expression changed. The emptiness in his eyes flickered, replaced by something else. Recognition. Memory. His pupils dilated slightly. His lips parted. Evelyn held her breath. Ethan's mouth began to move. His lips trembled, struggling to form shapes they had forgotten how to make. A sound emerged, rough and broken, like a rusty door being forced open after years of silence. "Ma, Ma." Evelyn's heart stopped. The sound was barely audible, more breath than voice. But it was there, real, unmistakable. Ethan's face contorted with effort. His small hands gripped the teddy bear so tightly his knuckles turned white. He was fighting against years of silence, pushing through walls that had been built inside him. "Mommy," a song. The words cracked and wavered, spoken by vocal cords that had not been used in 5 years, but they were words. Clear, Intentional, meaningful words. Tears streamed down Evelyn's face before she realized she was crying. Her chest heaved with sobs she could not control. This boy, this silent, forgotten boy, had just spoken. He had heard the music and remembered his mother and found the strength to say her name. "Yes," Evelyn whispered through her tears. "Yes, Ethan, that's Mommy's song. She sang it to you. She loved you so much." Ethan's eyes glistened. Whether with understanding or emotion, or simply the reflection of light, Evelyn could not tell. But something had shifted in him. A door had opened. She reached out and gently touched his hand. He did not pull away. The moment stretched between them, fragile and precious, a connection forged through music and memory and desperate hope. Then the bedroom door slammed open. Marcus Blackwell stood in the doorway, his massive frame filling the space, his face twisted with shock and fury. His eyes darted from Evelyn to the earbud in her hand to his son's tear-stained face. He had not heard Ethan speak. He had arrived too late for that. All he saw was a housekeeper hovering over his deaf son, holding some device near the boy's ear, tears running down both their faces. His hands clenched into fists. His jaw tightened. The air in the room turned to ice. "What the hell are you doing to my son?" The words came out as a growl, low and dangerous. The voice of a man who had killed before and would not hesitate to kill again. Evelyn rose slowly, her legs trembling beneath her. She had faced Ryan's violence for 4 years. She knew what rage looked like, how quickly it could turn deadly, but she had come too far to run now. "Mr. Blackwell," she said, her voice shaking but steady. "Please, let me explain." Marcus stepped forward, his presence filling the room like a storm. Behind him, Victor appeared in the hallway, hand reaching toward the weapon at his hip. The most powerful mafia boss in Chicago stood 3 feet away from Evelyn, ready to destroy her for touching his child. And she had only seconds to convince him that everything he believed was a lie. "What are you doing to my son?" Marcus's voice exploded through the room like thunder. He stormed forward, his massive frame blocking the doorway, his eyes burning with a fury that made Evelyn's blood turn to ice. She stumbled backward instinctively, her body reacting before her mind could process. Years of conditioning took over, the way Ryan's footsteps had sounded before the first blow, the way his shadow had fallen across her face, the way violence announced itself in the tension of a man's shoulders. Her back hit the wall. There was nowhere left to go. "Mr. Blackwell, please," she started, her voice trembling despite her efforts to control it. "Let me explain." "Explain?" Marcus roared, closing the distance between them. "You're torturing my son with sound? He's deaf. He can't hear anything. What kind of sick person are you?" Victor appeared in the doorway, his hand moving toward the weapon concealed beneath his jacket. His face was stone, awaiting orders. One word from Marcus, and Evelyn knew she would disappear. People like her disappeared all the time. No one would look for her, no one would care. But she did not run. Something inside her, something that had been dormant for years, refused to surrender. She had survived too much. She had come too far. And there was a little boy behind her who needed someone to fight for him. "Ethan is not completely deaf." The words burst out of her, desperate and fierce. "He just spoke. He said, 'Mommy's song.' I heard him. He can hear." "Mr. Blackwell, something is wrong with what you've been told." Marcus laughed, but there was no humor in the sound. It was cold and bitter, the laugh of a man who had stopped believing in miracles long ago. "You're insane," he said, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. "My son has never spoken a word in his life. Every doctor, every specialist, every expert has confirmed he was born deaf. And you expect me to believe that you, a housekeeper, discovered something they all missed?" He reached for her arm, his grip like iron. "You're done here. Victor, get her out of movement behind them." Small footsteps on the carpet. Marcus froze. Evelyn turned her head. Ethan was standing. The boy who never moved from his window seat. The boy who never reacted to anything. The boy who existed like a ghost in his own home. He was on his feet, and he was walking toward them. Marcus released Evelyn's arm, his face draining of color. He stared at his son as if seeing a stranger, as if the small figure crossing the room was an apparition rather than flesh and blood. Ethan walked past his father without looking at him. His steps were unsteady, his legs weak from years of disuse, but his direction was clear. He walked straight to Evelyn, his small arms wrapped around her waist, his face pressed against her stomach. He held on to her as if she were the only solid thing in a world made of smoke. Marcus could not move, could not breathe, could not process what he was witnessing. His son had never sought physical contact, not since Elena died. Not with anyone. The doctors said he lacked the capacity for connection. They said his world was sealed off, unreachable. But here he was, clinging to a woman he had known for mere weeks, holding her like she was his anchor. Then Ethan turned his head. He looked at his father. Those blue eyes, so long empty, now held something new, something alive. His lips moved. "Daddy." Marcus's legs buckled. "I heard." The words were rough, barely audible, scraped from a throat that had been silent for 5 years. But they were words. Real words. His son's voice. A voice Marcus had never heard before. He collapsed to his knees, his massive frame crumpling like paper. His hands shook, his eyes filled with tears he had not shed since Elena's funeral. "Ethan," he whispered, reaching toward the boy with trembling fingers. "Ethan, you can." He could not finish the sentence. His son had spoken. After 5 years of silence, after millions of dollars spent on specialists who promised nothing could be done, after countless nights of reading stories to a child who supposedly could not hear a single word, his son had spoken, and the first thing Ethan had reached for was not his father. It was the housekeeper who had seen what everyone else had missed. Marcus knelt on the floor, his world shattering and rebuilding in the same moment. Everything he had believed was crumbling. Every diagnosis, every treatment, every word Dr. Cole had ever spoken. Someone had lied to him. Someone had stolen 5 years of his son's life. Someone had kept Ethan locked in silence while pretending to help him. And Marcus Blackwell, the most powerful man in Chicago's underworld, had trusted that someone completely. The rage came slowly at first, building beneath the shock like lava rising through rock. His hands stopped trembling. His jaw tightened. His eyes hardened into something cold and lethal. Someone would pay for this. Someone would pay with everything they had. Marcus sat on the floor of his son's bedroom, Ethan cradled in his arms, tears streaming down the face that had made grown men tremble. The most feared man in Chicago wept openly, his broad shoulders shaking with sobs he could not control. He had not cried since Elena's funeral. He had buried his grief so deep that he thought it had turned to stone. But now the stone was cracking, and everything he had held back came flooding out. These were not tears of sadness. They were tears of overwhelming emotion. Joy that his son could speak, rage that someone had stolen 5 years of his voice, shame that he had not seen the truth himself. Victor stood frozen in the doorway, his hand fallen away from his weapon. His face, usually carved from granite, showed something rare: shock, confusion. The unshakable right hand of Marcus Blackwell had no idea how to process what he had just witnessed. The room fell silent except for Marcus's ragged breathing and the soft sounds of Ethan nestled against his father's chest. The boy's eyes were closed. His small body relaxed for the first time in years. Finally, Marcus lifted his head. His eyes found Evelyn, who still stood pressed against the wall, her heart pounding. "Explain." His voice was hoarse, barely above a whisper. "Everything." Evelyn took a shaky breath and began. She told him about the first time she noticed Ethan flinch at a loud noise, about the systematic tests she had conducted, the patterns she had observed, the way his right ear responded more than his left. She told him about finding the earbud and playing music, about watching Ethan's eyes come alive for the first time. She told him about the cabinet downstairs, the boxes of medication, the labels that all bore the same doctor's name. She pulled out her phone and showed him the photographs. Compound NX47, prescribed by Dr. Harrison Cole, dated across 5 years of Ethan's life. She told him what she had discovered online, the side effects, the FDA warnings, the fact that this drug had never been approved for children. She told him about Dr. Sarah Mitchell, the pediatrician who had confirmed her suspicions, who had recognized Cole's name and spoken of buried investigations and silenced accusations. Marcus listened without interrupting. His face cycled through emotions like a storm moving across the sky, pale with shock, red with fury, gray with guilt. When Evelyn finished, the silence stretched between them like a wire about to snap. "Cole," Marcus finally said, and the name came out like poison. "I trusted him. He came to me after Elena died. He said he was an old friend of the family. He said he would take care of Ethan," his hands curled into fists, the knuckles turning white. "I gave him my son. I let him into my home every week. I watched him examine Ethan and believed every word he said. His voice cracked. He was poisoning my boy, right in front of me, and I thanked him for it." Evelyn stepped forward cautiously. "You didn't know. You were grieving. You trusted a doctor who presented himself as a friend. Any father would have done the same." Marcus shook his head violently. "I should have seen it. I should have questioned. I should have protected him." He looked down at Ethan, still resting in his arms, and something in his expression hardened into steel. Cole will die for this. The words were not spoken in anger. They were spoken as fact, as certainty, the way a judge delivers a sentence that cannot be appealed. Evelyn's heart lurched. She understood the impulse. Part of her wanted Cole to suffer too, but she had seen what violence created. She had lived it. Before she could stop herself, she reached out and placed her hand on Marcus's arm. He looked at her hand, then at her face. No one touched Marcus Blackwell uninvited. No one dared, but Evelyn did not pull away. "No," she said quietly. "Not like that. Not through murder. If you kill him, you become the criminal. Ethan grows up knowing his father is in prison, or worse. Cole's crimes stay buried. Other children he may have harmed never get justice." Marcus stared at her, his jaw tight. "Do this the right way," Evelyn continued. "Expose him. Let the world see what he did. Let him face a courtroom, a jury, a prison cell, where he'll spend the rest of his life knowing everyone knows who he really is." Her voice strengthened. "Do it for Ethan. Do it for Elena. She wouldn't want you to become a murderer for revenge. She would want you to be the father Ethan needs." The room held its breath. Marcus could end her with a word. He could dismiss everything she said and order Cole's death before sunrise. But something in her words reached him. Something about Elena. Something about the kind of father he wanted to be. Slowly, the ice in his eyes began to thaw. He looked at Victor, who was watching the exchange with barely concealed amazement. "Find out everything about Cole," Marcus said. "Every patient he's treated, every drug he's prescribed, every skeleton in every closet." He looked back at Evelyn. "We do this your way. For now." It was not a promise of peace. It was not forgiveness or transformation. But it was a choice, a step away from the darkness. And somehow, the woman who had come here to hide had just convinced a mafia boss to choose justice over blood. The first thing Marcus did was flush every pill in the house. He gathered the bottles from Ethan's room, from the medicine cabinet, from the storage closet downstairs. He poured them into the toilet and watched them swirl away. His jaw clenched so tight the muscles in his neck stood out like cables. No more poison, not one more dose. The next morning, Dr. Sarah Mitchell arrived at the mansion in an unmarked car, escorted through the gates with strict instructions to tell no one about her visit. She carried a portable audiometer and other equipment, her face serious but determined. Marcus watched as she examined Ethan in the living room. The boy sat quietly, still clutching his teddy bear, but his eyes followed the doctor's movements with a new awareness that had not existed weeks before. The tests took over an hour. When Dr. Mitchell finished, she removed her glasses and looked at Marcus with an expression that mixed professional concern with barely contained outrage. "Your son has partial hearing capacity, particularly in his right ear," she said. "The damage to his auditory nerves is significant but not complete. If we stop all medications immediately and begin proper therapy, some recovery is possible." Marcus's hands trembled. "How much recovery?" "I cannot promise full restoration. But improvement? Yes. Speech therapy, auditory training, consistent care. He could learn to hear better. He could learn to speak." She paused. "The fact that he's already saying words after just weeks without the medication tells me his brain has been fighting this damage all along. Hope." For the first time in 5 years, Marcus allowed himself to feel hope. Over the following weeks, the mansion transformed into a command center. Marcus and Evelyn worked side by side in his study, organizing evidence, building timelines, documenting everything. She helped him sort through medical records, cross-reference prescription dates, and compile a file that grew thicker each day. It was strange, this partnership. Marcus had trusted only Victor for over a decade. He had learned that trust was a weapon others could use against you. But Evelyn asked for nothing. She worked tirelessly without complaint. She challenged him when he was wrong and supported him when he faltered. For the first time since Elena, he let someone in. Victor conducted his own investigation, using contacts Marcus preferred not to name. The results were damning. Dr. Harrison Cole had received regular payments from a shadow pharmaceutical company for years, money deposited into offshore accounts, amounts that far exceeded any legitimate medical practice. Cole was not just a corrupt doctor. He was a paid researcher using unwitting patients as test subjects. Ethan, meanwhile, continued to emerge from his shell. Each day brought new words. Rosa came first, spoken hesitantly in the kitchen while the old cook prepared breakfast. Rosa dropped the pan she was holding and burst into tears, gathering the boy into her arms while sobbing prayers of gratitude. Cookie followed a few days later. Then Garden, as Ethan pointed toward the window, where his mother's roses had once bloomed. His vocabulary was limited, his pronunciation rough, but he was speaking, he was connecting. The ghost was becoming a boy again. Marcus hired the best civil attorney in Chicago, a woman named Catherine Wells who had prosecuted corporate criminals and won judgments that made headlines. She was not connected to his other world, his darker dealings. This would be done cleanly, legally, the way Evelyn had asked. One evening, as they worked late in the study, Evelyn's phone buzzed with an unknown number. She glanced at the screen and went pale. Her hands shook so violently she nearly dropped the device. Marcus noticed immediately. Who was that? Evelyn did not answer. She silenced the phone and set it face down on the desk, but her fear was obvious. Her breathing had quickened. Her eyes darted toward the windows as if expecting someone to appear. Marcus leaned forward. You're hiding from someone. It was not a question. Evelyn sat frozen for a long moment. Then, slowly, she began to speak. She told him about Ryan, the marriage that had seemed like salvation, the violence that had followed, the years of abuse, the broken bones, the hospital visits filled with lies. She told him about Lily. Her voice broke when she spoke her daughter's name, but she forced herself to continue. The pregnancy, the hope, the night Ryan came home drunk and destroyed everything. She told him about running, the fake name, the constant fear, the knowledge that Ryan was still out there, still searching, still promising to finish what he started. When she finished, the study was silent. Marcus stared at her for a long time, his expression unreadable. Then he spoke, his voice low and certain. No one will touch you. That is my promise. Evelyn wanted to protest that he could not guarantee such things, that Ryan was dangerous, that she did not want to burden him with her problems. But something in Marcus's eyes stopped her. She did not know yet what a promise from Marcus Blackwell truly meant. She did not understand the resources at his command, the reach of his influence, the absolute certainty with which he protected those he considered his own. She would learn soon enough, because Marcus Blackwell never broke a promise, and Ryan Carter had just become a marked man. Victor burst into the study with urgent news. Cole is running. He booked a one-way ticket to Switzerland. Flight leaves tomorrow night. Marcus rose from his chair, his face darkening. Somehow, the doctor had sensed danger. Their window was closing fast. Invite him here, Evelyn suggested. Tell him you want one final examination before taking Ethan to a new specialist. His arrogance will be his downfall. Marcus considered this. His instinct was to drag Cole into a basement and extract the truth through darker methods. But he had promised Evelyn. He had promised to do this the right way. The next afternoon, Dr. Harrison Cole's silver Mercedes rolled through the mansion gates. He stepped out wearing his usual confident smile, completely unaware that he was walking into a trap. Marcus greeted him in the foyer with a handshake that required every ounce of self-control. In the adjacent study, Evelyn sat with her phone recording every sound through the slightly open door. Victor stood beside her, ready to intervene. Marcus settled into his chair and fixed Cole with a steady gaze. I've been reviewing Ethan's medications. Compound NX47, for instance. Can you tell me about that? A slight tightening around Cole's eyes. Standard neurological support. Commonly prescribed. Is it? Marcus produced a folded document. Because according to the FDA, that compound was never approved for pediatric use. Trials were halted due to severe side effects, including damage to auditory nerves. Cole's face paled. Sweat beaded on his forehead. That information is outdated. The formulation has been revised. The same compound a pharmatech researcher was fired for testing illegally on children, Marcus interrupted. A researcher named Harrison Cole. The doctor's composure shattered. Mr. Blackwell, please. You have to understand. Understand what? That you used my son as a test subject? I never intended harm. Cole's voice rose desperately. My research needed data. Live subjects were impossible through proper channels. Ethan was perfect. After his mother died, no one paid attention. I thought I could complete my study and reverse the effects before anyone. He stopped. Realizing what he had admitted, Marcus's knuckles went white with restrained violence. Did you get all of that? He called out. Evelyn stepped from the study, phone held high. Every word. Mr. Blackwell. Cole's face went gray. This is entrapment. My lawyers will. Victor appeared behind him, blocking the exit, turning the lock with a decisive click. Dr. Harrison Cole stood surrounded, the mafia boss with murder in his eyes, the enforcer guarding the door, the housekeeper holding evidence that would destroy him. His career was over. His freedom was gone, but he was still breathing. Marcus had chosen law over blood, justice over vengeance, Cole would face a courtroom, not a grave, and that was a harder punishment than death. The federal courthouse in downtown Chicago had seen many trials, but few drew as much attention as the case against Dr. Harrison Cole. Reporters crowded the steps. Camera crews lined the sidewalks. The story of a trusted physician poisoning children for illegal research had captured national outrage. Cole sat at the defendant's table in an orange jumpsuit, his silver hair now disheveled, his confident smile replaced by hollow desperation. He had been denied bail after the judge determined he was a flight risk. His passport had been confiscated. His accounts had been frozen. The man who had once walked freely through the Blackwell mansion now faced the full weight of federal prosecution. Evelyn was called as the first witness. Her hands trembled as she approached the stand. The courtroom felt enormous, filled with strangers who would judge her every word. She thought of Ryan, of all the times she had been too afraid to speak. But this was different. This time, her voice could save someone. She told the jury everything. The small reactions she had noticed in Ethan, the tests with the earbud, the medication bottles she had discovered, the research that led her to Dr. Sarah Mitchell. The defense attorney tried to discredit her. She was just a housekeeper. She had no medical training. She had been employed for mere weeks before making accusations. But Evelyn remained steady. She answered each question calmly, her eyes never leaving the jury. Dr. Mitchell testified next, presenting medical evidence that left no room for doubt. She explained compound NX-47, its unapproved status, its documented side effects. She described her examination of Ethan, the damage to his auditory nerves, the clear signs of chemical interference. Then came the other families. One by one, they took the stand. Parents whose children had been treated by Dr. Cole over the years. A mother from Indiana sobbed as she described how her son had lost his hearing permanently after 6 months of Cole's care. A father from Ohio spoke of behavioral changes in his daughter that doctors could never explain. Cole had not stopped with Ethan. He had been conducting his experiments for over a decade, leaving a trail of damaged children behind him. When Marcus took the stand, the courtroom fell silent. The most powerful man in Chicago's underworld sat before the jury in a tailored suit, his face carved from stone. He spoke of trusting Cole after Elena's death, of believing every lie, of watching his son slip further into silence while paying the man responsible. His voice broke only once. I sat beside my son's bed every night for 5 years, reading him stories he supposedly could not hear. Then one afternoon, a woman I had known for weeks played him his mother's favorite song, and he spoke. Marcus paused, his jaw tight. He looked at me and said, "Daddy," I heard. Those were the first words my son ever spoke, and they should have come 5 years earlier. The recording of Cole's confession was played for the jury. His own voice filled the courtroom, admitting to using Ethan as a test subject, acknowledging that he had chosen the boy because no one would notice. The jury deliberated for less than 3 hours. Guilty on all counts: illegal drug testing on minors, medical malpractice, causing grievous bodily harm to children, fraud. The judge sentenced Dr. Harrison Cole to 25 years in federal prison, without possibility of early parole. As guards led him away, Cole looked back at Marcus with hatred in his eyes. Marcus did not flinch. He simply watched the man who had stolen 5 years of his son's life disappear through a side door, knowing Cole would spend the rest of his days in a cell. Outside the courthouse, the winter sun broke through gray clouds. Marcus lifted Ethan into his arms. The boy was smiling, a real smile that reached his eyes. He pointed at a bird on a nearby tree and said, "Bird, Daddy, I hear bird." Tears streamed down Marcus's face as he held his son close. Evelyn stood beside them, watching the moment with her own tears falling freely. She had come to this city to disappear. Instead, she had found purpose. She had found family. Justice had been served. A monster had been stopped. A little boy was learning to hear the world again. But the story was not over. Evelyn still carried her own ghosts. And Marcus had something important to ask her, something that would change both their lives forever. The trial made national headlines. Newspapers called it the Doctor of Silence, and Evelyn's face appeared on front pages across the country. She was described as the heroic housekeeper who saved a child from a monster in a white coat. She should have felt proud. Instead, she felt exposed. The message arrived 3 nights after the verdict. Her phone buzzed at midnight, waking her from restless sleep. An unknown number. 4 words that turned her blood to ice. "Found you, Evelyn. Ryan." She sat frozen in bed, her heart pounding so hard she could hear it in her ears. He had seen her face in the news. He knew where she was. The hiding was over. Her first instinct was to run, Pack her bag, slip out before dawn, disappear again. She had done it before. She could do it again. But where would she go? And how could she leave Ethan? Marcus found her in the kitchen at 3 a.m, staring at her phone with hollow eyes. "What happened?" he asked. She showed him the message. Marcus read it once. His expression did not change. No explosion of anger, no dramatic threats, just a cold, calculating stillness that was somehow more frightening than rage. "Tell me everything about him," he said quietly. By morning, Victor had compiled a complete file. Ryan Carter, age 32. Multiple arrests for domestic violence, restraining orders from 2 states, probation violations, witnesses who had been too afraid to testify. The man was a predator with a documented history of abuse, and he had just made the mistake of threatening someone under Marcus Blackwell's protection. "Let me handle this," Marcus said. Evelyn grabbed his arm, panic rising. "Don't kill him, please. I don't want you going to prison because of me." Marcus looked at her, and for the first time since she had known him, he smiled. It was not a warm smile, but it was genuine. "Who said anything about killing? There are more effective methods." Within a week, Ryan Carter was arrested in Indiana. Victor had anonymously delivered evidence to local police. The threatening messages, documentation of restraining order violations, testimony from previous victims who finally felt safe enough to speak. Ryan was charged with stalking, criminal threatening, and multiple probation violations. The judge denied bail. He would spend the next 8 years in state prison, with additional federal charges pending. Evelyn received the news while sitting in the garden with Ethan. For a long moment, she could not breathe. Then the tears came, not from sadness, but from relief so overwhelming it felt like drowning in reverse. She was free. After 23 years of fear, abuse, and running, she was finally free. The months that followed were the happiest of her life. Ethan's progress amazed everyone. Speech therapy twice a week, hearing exercises daily. Within 6 months, he was speaking in full sentences, his vocabulary expanding rapidly. He started piano lessons, his small fingers finding melodies that filled the mansion with music it had not heard in years. Rosa cried almost every day, overwhelmed by the transformation. One evening, Marcus asked Evelyn to join him in the study. He sat behind his desk, looking uncomfortable in a way she had never seen before. The feared mafia boss was nervous. "Ethan needs a mother," he said finally. "He loves you. He trusts you. You're the one who brought him back to life." He paused, struggling with words that did not come naturally. "I want you to adopt him, officially, legally. Make him your son." Evelyn's vision blurred with tears. She thought of Lily, the daughter she had lost, the empty space in her heart that had never healed. She could not replace Lily. No one could, but perhaps she could honor her memory by loving another child who needed her. "Yes," she whispered. The adoption was finalized on a Tuesday in spring. The courtroom was small and quiet, nothing like the chaos of Cole's trial. The judge smiled as she signed the papers. Victor stood in the back, pretending not to wipe his eyes. Rosa sat in the front row, sobbing openly. When it was done, Ethan ran to Evelyn and threw his arms around her waist. "Mommy," he said clearly, his voice strong and sure. Like the song, Evelyn held him tight, tears streaming down her face. She had lost her parents at 4. She had survived foster homes and abuse and a husband who tried to destroy her. She had buried a daughter who never took a breath. But here, in this mansion that had once felt like a tomb, she had found everything she thought was lost forever. A son who called her mommy, a purpose that gave her life meaning, a family built not from blood but from choice. And this was only the beginning. 5 years had passed since the trial that changed everything. The Blackwell mansion stood transformed under the summer sun. Where silence once suffocated every room, music now flowed through open windows. Where cold marble had echoed with emptiness, warm laughter filled the halls. The house that had been a tomb was now a home. Ethan was 11 years old, tall for his age, with his mother Elena's blue eyes and his father's determined jaw. His hearing had recovered nearly completely, a miracle that doctors attributed to early intervention and the resilience of youth. He attended regular school now, excelled in his classes, and had more friends than he could count. But his true passion was music. The piano in the living room, untouched for years after Elena's death, had become Ethan's constant companion. He practiced for hours each day, his fingers dancing across the keys with natural talent that his teachers called extraordinary. He dreamed of becoming a composer, of creating melodies that would make people feel what he had felt when music first broke through his silence. Evelyn was 32 now, her face softened by years of happiness instead of hardened by fear. She had enrolled in university, pursuing a degree in social work. Every class, every textbook, every exam brought her closer to her goal, helping children who had suffered as she once had. She volunteered at shelters on weekends, listening to stories that broke her heart and offering hope she had once desperately needed herself. Marcus had changed too. The mafia boss who had ruled Chicago's underworld was slowly stepping away from the shadows. He had shifted his empire toward legitimate businesses, distancing himself from the violence that had defined his past. Victor still stood by his side, but their conversations now centered on quarterly reports, rather than territorial disputes. The rose garden behind the mansion bloomed magnificently every spring. Ethan had taken over its care, learning to prune and water and nurture the flowers his birth mother had loved. It was his way of keeping Elena's memory alive, of honoring the woman he could not remember but whose song had brought him back to the world. On a warm evening in June, the family gathered at Ethan's school for the annual music recital. The auditorium was packed with parents and students, buzzing with anticipation. Marcus and Evelyn sat in the front row, their hands intertwined, waiting for their son to appear. When Ethan walked onto the stage, the audience fell silent. He sat at the grand piano, adjusted the microphone, and looked out at the crowd. His eyes found his parents immediately. He smiled. "This piece is called The Sound of Love," he announced, his voice clear and confident. "I wrote it for the two people who gave me my voice." His fingers touched the keys. The melody that emerged was unlike anything the audience had heard before. It began softly, tentatively, like a child taking first steps. Then it grew stronger, more complex, weaving together joy and sorrow, loss and redemption. It told the story of silence and discovery, of darkness and light, of a family built not from blood but from love. When the final note faded, the auditorium erupted in applause. Ethan stood and walked to the microphone one more time. "I want to thank my mom, Evelyn," he said, his voice trembling slightly. "She heard me when no one else was listening. She believed in me when everyone else had given up." He paused, looking at Marcus. "And thank you, Dad, for trusting her, for trusting us." Tears streamed down Evelyn's face. Marcus squeezed her hand so tightly it almost hurt. But it was a good pain, the kind that reminded her she was alive, she was loved, she was home. After the recital, they drove back to the mansion in comfortable silence. Ethan fell asleep in the back seat, exhausted and happy. The stars shone brightly through the car windows. Sometimes, the most broken people become the greatest healers. Evelyn had arrived at the Blackwell mansion with nothing but a suitcase and a shattered heart. She had been running from a past that threatened to destroy her, hiding from a world that had never shown her kindness. She had expected nothing, hoped for nothing, wanted only to survive another day. Instead, she found a purpose. She found a son who needed her voice when his own had been stolen. She found a family that chose her, not because of blood or obligation, but because of love. If you are feeling alone right now, know that somewhere out there, someone needs you. Your presence matters. Your voice matters. You may not see it yet, but the person who will change your life might be just around the corner, waiting for you to show up. If you are carrying wounds that seem impossible to heal, know that healing is possible. It may not happen overnight. It may take years, but every step forward, no matter how small, is a victory. You are stronger than you know. Family is not defined by blood. Family is defined by choice, by presence, by the people who show up when everything falls apart, the people who listen when the world goes deaf. If this story touched your heart, please share it with someone who needs to hear it. You never know whose life might be changed by a single story, a single moment of connection. We would love to hear from you. Leave a comment below and tell us, who is the person who listened to you when no one else would? How did they change your life? Your story might inspire someone else who is struggling right now. If you enjoyed this video, please take a moment to like and subscribe to our channel. We share stories like this every day, stories of hope, healing, and the incredible resilience of the human spirit. Your support helps us reach more people who need these messages. Wishing you good health, happiness, and peace in your daily life. May you always find someone willing to listen to your voice, no matter how quiet it may seem. Thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. Thank you for being part of this community. Goodbye for now, and we will see you in the next video. Silence can be a prison, but love is the key. This story ends here, but their journey continues, and perhaps yours is just beginning.